Welcome to the Yukon 1000 race brief. There'll be one other race brief after that, and that will be the day before on the start line. Firstly, I just congratulate you on being selected. Fantastic round of applications, and then some wonderful interviews. And then we've got a final 30 of which you're a part of. So well done. But really, this draws a line in the sand as we move forward now, and you've got the 10 months or so to focus on preparation. And this brief sets to put hopefully some clarity for you as you do your estimate on what skills and drills you've got as a pair and where your priorities in training will lie. So I'm just going to cover the major sort of points and point a few directions, but not the macro. That's down to you to go into that minutiae detail and work out what you need to do moving forward. It being an expeditionary race, it is on you from here on in. This brief is not in a written format. The reason for that is twofold, really. So you know my voice and you can understand me, especially if your English isn't great, coming from an international team, and get used to it prior to the final race brief. But also, I'll likely be on the end of the call in an emergency also, and so that we can communicate. So this is what the brief will cover. I'll give you a few minutes to digest that before we move on. So a few race dates and times. So pre-race activity then, you got the briefing on the 9th of July at around 0930 hours. We'll let you know if that changes slightly. It's normally centered on the stern wheeler, but we'll do that in the morning as early as we can, as convenient for everybody. So you certainly want to be there before the 9th. Most of you are going to be there a few days before that anyway, having little runs and finalising kit. But that's when we'll start. Kit check then will be again on the same day, and I'll do it as early as I can at around 1200 hours. This sort of goes on a little bit longer than we anticipate. Normally issues with phones and trackers getting everybody on, or people not on the internet use their phones, but hopefully not this year, and we'll get that cracked as quick as we can. If anybody is not compliant with the packing list or hasn't got comms, we'll then reschedule a time that night for them. And hopefully that works, and if it doesn't, then they won't move forward to the next day. Race day then is the 10th of July at 0730. Normally you're sort of down there from about 5:36, and we're down there at the start point. And I'll have talked through the whole start of the race the day before on the briefing. But 7:30 on the dot, we'll be off and we'll start. Midpoint cut-off then. So the midpoint cut-off as it stands at the moment is 13th of July at 1830. Again, this might change slightly left or right, weather dependent, height of the river, but it won't change by much, an hour or two either way. And then finally, the end of the race. Again, at the moment, it's the 18th of July, and it's at 2300 hours on the 18th. It should be, if you've done your maths correctly, the next day at 0730. But actually, if you take the time off crossing into Alaska, the hour off, and your race time, that's when we finish. That's the nearest point that you can get out that night. So that's as it stands at the moment. Again, I might change this. I'll let you know in the race pre-briefing. It probably won't get any shorter than that, but I might add time if the river's low, if we're expecting some pretty horrendous weather. I might add to that timing, but that's as it stands at the moment. So race rules for the race. We've covered this a little bit in the interview, but I'll just touch on it again, and then I will just before the race. This allows you to sort of work out what you need to practice in your training as well. So the satellite phone, you'll have an Iridium phone, and it will only be on an Iridium network, and that will come on a contract or preloaded minutes. Please don't suggest anything else or ask. It's the only network that works consistently all the way up there, and that will get comms with it when you need it to. Again, please know your tech and know how to use it, and make sure it's working before you arrive. It always catches a couple of teams out on the kit check when they don't know how to use this, or the phone doesn't work and it's not on a contract. and they're in a mad scramble trying to find an alternative backup, or they don't start the race. You're not going to start the race unless we've established comms. Satellite phone then will be on your tent at night for your 6 hours off, and it will be turned on. You'll make sure that it's got a signal, and there's a series of reasons for that. The first one is, firstly, that I can check in with you if your trackers aren't working, or there's an issue that's happened in the day and I need to understand it. And I'll do that via text or call you in an emergency. Or I need you to respond to a team that's near you that's in distress, and you happen to be the nearest team. But also, it serves as a purpose to make sure that you get this kit out and you charge it up and have the ability to charge it up and use your solar and your tech to keep it running. A few years ago, when I used to check, when I didn't implement this, I used to get satellite phones at the end of the race and check them all. None of them would have any power whatsoever. And so you want to know that when you close that down in the morning, it's fully charged, and the next time you might need to use it is in an emergency, and you know and you're confident it will work. But it gets you used to the tech as well, using it during the race. If you want to have the satellite phone on 24 hours a day, because it makes you feel better and you're more comfortable, that's fine, but you just need to have the ability to charge it and keep it charged. The batteries, they do drink it, constantly fighting for signal up there and satellites, so they do run down quite quickly. Your tracker will be set up, and it'll be fully set up by around May next year, and we'll send out direction on that through the tracking company. But you'll be on 10-minute pings throughout the race. So that's a signal getting sent and put onto our tracker database every 10 minutes, so we know where you are. Again, understand your tracker, understand the tech behind it, what happens when you hit the SOS button, because it's your emergency personal locating device first and foremost. That's why you own it, buy it, establish it, and master the tech with it. As I said, we only accept Zoleo trackers, no other tracker, and there's a few reasons for that. I've tested it on an expedition over the last 12 months. It's the only tracker that consistently works up there along the river. Spot tracker no longer really do what they say they do, and the design of the latest trackers isn't exactly aligned to racing anymore. So this is what we're switching to, and this is what everybody will have. And every individual will have one, and it will be fitted on the left-hand shoulder. The reason for that is that the satellites are off to the left as you go along the route. Unsupported, okay, means no other active devices outside of that. So again, at the end of the race, we're going to check your satellite phone and your mobile phones or cell phones that are tethered to your Zoleo to make sure that there has been no other communication outside the race other than to myself, the Spot tracking company, or sorry, the Zoleo tracking company guys that we use, or the emergency services if they've been activated. That's it. Anything outside of that will be a disqualification. So understand your phones and your tech to make sure that you're not receiving incoming calls either. There's only a small window where you can receive normal cell phone reception. That's going past Dawson City anyway. So, it just wants to be off airplane mode, only tethered to your Zoleo for critical messages. Mandatory stops. At the moment, it will be between 2200 hours and 2300 hours. That is 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock in the evening for most people out there. But that may switch slightly, and the window of that might open depending on how high the river is and how hard it is to find camps. So, but I've only had to do that once. And you'll stop in that time, and you'll record the time that you stop. You'll be aware of exactly when you stop, and you need to work out 6 hours from that moment. 6 hours later, then you'll obviously set off, and you'll continue on the race. If you want to take more than that 6 hours, that's fine, but you're probably not going to make the cut-offs if that becomes a habit from day one. Which leads me nicely onto the cut-off at Dawson City. That's to be confirmed, but at the moment it's the 13th of July at 18:30 hours in the evening. It's likely to slip left or right by several hours, and this will be again down to the ice breakup and how much water is in the river and the weather. The dropout procedure. Now, there's limited to where you can drop out, but when you do drop out, you'll keep your trackers on and you'll obviously call me. So there's Carmax before Dawson City where you can drop out, but again, getting you and your boats out there is going to be on you. because you've decided to drop out for whatever reason. At Dawson City, that's a little bit easier, but we'll talk about this before the race. You can drop out there, but beyond that, it becomes a real challenge, and it's going to be a costly exercise for you to get you and your boats out of either Eagle or Circle, because they're the only two places before the end of the race. But know they're there, and if you know you're only dropping out because you're having an issue as a team. Rubbish. I mean, it has to be said to leave no trace, but you are the type of people that have been selected for this race that absolutely understand that. But please just consider it. It's a beautiful, stunning place up there, and we don't want to tarnish it in any way. Our right to pull you out or add penalties. So it's our right should the red flags be raised between now and the start of the race, or right up to on the race, if we feel that you're an issue to the race. So what do I mean by that? What do I care about? I care, as you should care, that the teams around you are of the appropriate standard and the right standard of this race to be able to recover and save other teams as well as themselves. And if you're adding flags to that and you're showing levels of incompetence by generating silly questions or not doing your due diligence and research into the race, then before we start, between now and the start date, I'll just pull the plug if I've got any doubts, or right up to the start line. Hopefully I don't have to exercise this, but it's there. Just consider it before you we get team sale, you're not doing enough research, and then just go and asking everybody else what they did. And I'll pull the plug on you. So hopefully that doesn't happen. Penalties. So I don't deal in minutes, I deal in hours. What does that look like? For an example, if you leave 3 minutes before your 6 hour point on your nightly stop, then I'll give you a freebie on the first night. If the next day you leave 3 minutes again, then that's creeping excellence. I'm gonna add 3 hours to that. So that's the kind of accuracy that I need, because your spot tracker is going to tell me when you land. So that's the kind of thing I'm looking at. Also, if I've told you not to stay within sort of 100 meters of a building, and there's a grid of you 10 meters outside the building for the night for 6 hours. That for me is, I'm going to add hours or disqualify you. If you pulled up at CarMax for no reason and you're opposite sort of the building's there and you stop there and you can't explain why, again, I'm going to either disqualify you or add time. But I'll discuss all this before the race. Race cut-off. At the moment, it's the 18th of July. For those mathematicians of you, the 9-day mark would be the 19th of July at 7:30 hours. But once you take the time off for crossing the border into Alaska, and then your 6 hours rest, we're going to go with the 18th of July at 2300 hours. Again, this may change depending on the weather and the flow and the height and the amount of water in the Yukon. So, but that's as it stands at the moment, and that you should plan to work towards. Vessel sizes. This is only really applicable if you are bringing your own, and it's common sense. I don't normally have an issue with this. They are essentially the vessels that are up there that the Yukon race fleet own, mostly, all of them. But if you bring your own, just let me know and just give me a nod that you are compliant and fit with that. Please don't reach out that you want something that's pretty radical outside of that, that it's not been done before, unless you're absolutely sure it's going to make the grade. Other than that, just if you've got any glaring questions that fit outside of that, just contact me. So boat supplier recommendation really. So you're either bringing your own boat or you are going to rent one. There are only a couple of places where you can rent them if you know someone locally that will rent you a boat that meets the right standard, or you're going to use Yukon Race Fleet, and that's Ben Lotz who runs that. They've been with us a couple of years now. Before that, it was Thomas de Jager at Yukon Wide, but all those boats are now owned by the Yukon Race Fleet. So we've got the luxury that Ben is a former Yukon 1000 racer and Yukon RiverQuest. So he knows his stuff and can make sure that you're fitted as a team for the right boat. What's important to note, though, is that's Ben's role, the boats. Please don't go pestering him about other random information about the race. Again, do your own research. I speak to Ben daily or weekly, and he'll feedback if there's also concerns, because those boats cost a lot of money and they are a real effort to get up to that part of the world. And if you're not showing competency in your preparation, he'll worry about his very expensive boats that somebody doesn't know what they're doing in it. So it kind of goes both ways. So again, don't become a red flag to him, because you'll become a red flag to me. Also, while we're talking about boats, if there's any changes you want to make to it, please go through Ben. Don't turn up and make any changes to it. The boats, whether that's putting stickers on or anything like that, just tip your hat to Ben. And also, when it comes to like paddles, you can, great to ask advice, but he won't supply paddles. You'll have to bring yours, and do your due diligence in that. We had a team last year that broke their carbon canoe paddle on the first day, and their rental backup was a wooden one, which they had to paddle with for the rest of the race. I'm pretty sure it affected the outcome of the race, but again, this is the level of detail you need to go into. Also, do you need smaller blades? On really strong windy headwind days, you're lifting that blade out of the water, whether it's kayak or a canoe, and then you're fighting it through the wind. You can fatigue pretty quick. So do you want a smaller blade on a windy, hard day, or later in the day when you become more fatigued? That's absolutely on you, but Ben's not going to supply that unless you've chatted through with him on that. A few things to consider as well. Ben will obviously tell you he'll want you to look after the equipment, and that equipment inside out before you start, and obviously on the race. You'll get some pre-runs in it that Ben will arrange in the week before that you can do with him as per his website. Just reach out in the booking. Get your booking in as soon as you can. You want to have it in within 24 hours of this going out if you haven't already done so. There might not be enough boats to service you, and that will compromise your place on the race. So you're not going to do this race without a boat. And then lastly, understand how you repair your boat, how you fix your boat, and the what ifs. Here's a great example of that. The last year's winners for the 2025 race, they trained extensively without a rear rudder on their kayak, and they trained a lot with that. Day one, their kayak broke off on the waves going across Lake Labarge. Sort of 20 miles into the race, they continued over another 100 miles that day without it. It made no changes. They slowed down a wee bit and had to adjust, but that's how they trained and prepared. So a wee bit to think about your boat supplier, where it's coming from and moving. And lastly, Ben also runs the logistics for all boats back, so it just ties in nicely if you've got a boat from him to make it easier. Boat supplier. Equipment, and I'm just going to cover the sort of big ticket items really. With this, the email that this came out on, you've got the packing list there as well, and that's absolutely to be adhered to 100%. That's all the minimum kit you need to sustain yourself over this race. So train with it and clearly turn up with it. I'll assure this in the kit check, as well as your tech, and you won't move forward to the start of the race unless it's all there and in good order. So some of the key safety equipment we'll talk about. I've talked about your tech. So you're going to have your Zoleo tracker that you're going to own. And the reason for this is it's an emergency person locating device should you go missing or need a distress call, an SOS call. And we merely take the signal from that to ashore and adjudicate the race. And then also concurrently to that, you've got your satellite phone, and all this will go back on the Iridium network to the global ops room that I'll cover on later on in the brief. And that's the sort of key safety ticket items that we're concerned with. Firearms, if you feel the need to bring a firearm, I don't see there is a need, but if you feel there is and you want to bring a firearm, that's fine. Just make sure you've got the correct permits. Please keep it concealed. Other racers don't need to know. And then just keep it to yourself. Some people get sensitive about firearms being out there, but yeah, if you need one, I get it. It's on you. So bear spray and bear bangers. At the moment on the packing list, it's one bear spray per team. Now I have a load from last year that were brand new and unwrapped and that I've used for an expedition. I'll rent them out or sell them for $20 each, but probably won't be able to cover everybody. So some of you will have to buy them. They're about $60 for a bear spray. But if you want more than that, one each, for instance, then you can buy them. There's several places in Whitehorse. Bear bangers, I'm sure you'll go down the YouTube rabbit hole and see the utility of them. I think they're great. They're expensive and you throw them away at the end. They are good if you want to use them or take them. I would recommend it, but they're not implemented on the packing list. Food. You can buy your food wherever your country is, and you can try bring it into the Yukon. Normally, about one or two people get stopped and it gets taken off them, but there's plenty of places there to buy it as well. All the main brands in a really good outdoor store on the high street. But yeah, most of you will probably bring your own. Water, yep, just really do that due diligence on your filters, etc., and what works and try it. Don't turn up for the first time and try it. Don't work on purity tabs as a first resort. You risk messing around with your insides sort of 3 days into the race. Again, just spend some time on it. Don't think it's a given. Paddles, I've sort of touched on paddles before, but really, you're probably going to go for a carbon option. Consider later on in the day a smaller blade for when you're fatigued in those sort of last 5 hours of the day. But really consider you're going to have at least 2 or 3 days of really strong winds where it feels like you're lifting that paddle out of the water but it's still in the water. You're fighting it to push it through the wind. So certainly smaller blades are going to help. But also your spare paddles, what does that look like? It sort of always catches somebody out every year when they snap a carbon paddle and they're paddling the rest of the way on a paddle that they didn't really expect to use that's not up to the standard. You don't want to be that team. So again, do your work on that. Travel smart, which means, what do I mean by that? So at the moment we can't move any of your stuff across the border into Alaska. Certainly the Yukon race fleet is not going to touch any of your belongings and move them across the border, US border into Alaska either. And so there is only really one other option. You travel super light and it all goes with you in the canoe or kayak, or you FedEx it to a hotel where you have booked for when you get out and it's waiting there for you, your extra baggage if you think you need it. So again, consider that. There's always somebody frantic in the morning throwing items of clothing away in the bin that they don't really want to be on the race day morning. So again, try not to be that person. And then really equipment, I sort of said it at the start of this brief, but you really need to get that boat locked in as soon as you can, because ultimately you've been accepted onto the race, but there might not be a boat for you. It's sort of first come, first serve. There isn't a massive fleet there. So get your boat locked in, and then you've got yourself a slot on the race. Get it locked in straight after this brief. Okay, crossing the border into the US, into Alaska. I'll cover this in the race brief before we set off, but just a quick overview. So you're going to push past Dawson City once you've made the cutoff, and then sort of 10 hours, 12 hours later, you're going to hit Eagle, Alaska. You're going to jump out there and you're going to call the phone booth and you're going to come out with your team number that I'll issue you before the start of the race. Team name of your team name is irrelevant to them. And it'll be a pretty frosty guy normally. So you're going to give the team number out and they're going to correspond it with a spreadsheet that I send to them prior, and then you're going to get the nod to carry on. But the main thing is next year I'll ask you for copies of your passports, etc., and I'll hold this and delete this after the race. But essentially I'll give it to the border agency. The reason for this is it's what they want and it's the best way forward. It serves two purposes. At least twice in the last few years, the phone line has been hit by lightning and it takes a while for anybody to get out there and repair it. I call through via Starlink and say when you've crossed the border, they check it with the spreadsheet, see a copy of your passport, your flight details out and everything else, and they are happy and they mark you off. But also it serves as a land checkpoint for me as well, and they let me know that you are safely through the border, and it's just another point that I know where you are and that you're okay. So please be aware of that. You need obviously the relevant ESTAs to travel into the US. and you must have one moving forward. So mapping and GPS, but I'll really cover mapping. So what is your experience in first and foremost? So there's a reason why I don't make the maps and give them out for this. Firstly, it's not really been done. Yep, there's handheld maps that you can buy in Whitehorse, but and online, but I don't want to see them. If you want them as extra, that's on you, but that's not what I want to see in the kit check and expect you to use. It's not accurate and it's a hand-drawn map. But what I expect to see is a gridded and scaled map that you've built uh, um, for the race. So, what is your experience? It depends. So, I'm of a military background, and I need to see air photography and a bit of contours depending on where I am. And I also use MGRS, not longitude and latitude. But it depends on your background, what you are, whether you're a climber or a sailor, what you're going to use. But the reason that you build this is as a couple of reasons. Firstly, it helps you visualize and understand where you're going, the size and scale, and that it feels familiar when you're on the ground actually doing the race. And secondly, it really plays to your skill set and it works on what you know and what you've trained with and what you understand. I urge you, and I see it on kit checks last year, please don't just copy someone else's maps and that you don't understand them, because I'll stand there and ask you about it. And I'll ask you if you got them from somewhere else. If you got a map from somewhere else and you can't understand it, then that'll be really awkward for you if you can't read a grid off longitude and latitude and that you're just basically bluffing it with your GPS device. You need to be able to use it. And the main reason for this and why I want it gridded and scaled is it doesn't matter if it's MGRS or longitude and latitude. If I ring you up at 3 o'clock in the morning and tell you to move to an island 2Ks further down the river where a team is in distress, that I can either give you a longitude and latitude reference or an MGRS grid, and that you can put it into your GPS and you can go there and be the first responders for that team, or maybe another team to you. So that's the outline of the reason why we do this. But to give you some assistance, you can do it off alltrails.com or you can use the Google Earth imagery and grid and scale it. It's not hard to do. It just requires a bit of practice, and then sit down and build your mapping that works for you, and ensure that you know how to use your GPS concurrently with the mapping that you've set up. And again, going back to that question, can you plug an MGRS or a longitude latitude grid into that? If I have to give it to you in the middle of the night to go and rescue another team, can you do that? You must be able to do that. And so again, build this into your training. But I urge you, building your own mapping makes you visualize and understand that race before you go down and do it. It will make you much, much better prepared. It is a really good exercise that I'm sure most previous racers you reach out to will testify to. And you also need to have distance markers on it for your own benefit as well, so that I can see. Don't give me a map that's just got distant markers all the way down the river and is not gridded and scaled. You need to have it gridded and scaled. You need to be able to back up, should your GPS not work, that you can give a grid of where you are. So safety and tracking. So I've said we're going with Zoleo. Zoleo is a two-way communication device. It's got a fantastic built-in battery that you probably need to recharge after about 3 or 4 days, but it's a really simplistic piece of equipment I trialed last year on an expedition. It's much better than the Spot that is outdating itself with poor tech. And moving forward, its safety function of going straight to the Global Rescue Ops Room, which is a very active, well-resourced and recruited ops room for emergency services, it makes us a bit safer. That's your responsibility, that equipment. Train with it on your top left shoulder, because that optimizes satellite signal with a 20mm angle off the curvature of the Earth, and get used to training with that and being able to track your routes. You will need to pair it to a phone or your phone and understand it and be able to work it. And then next year, our tracking services will reach out to you directly to your emails to make sure you're set up to the system and ready to go. Satellite phone, I've touched on it. You've got to be familiar with it so that when you pull it out in an emergency, that you are familiar with it. I will give you the preloaded phone numbers just before the race on the final race brief that you need to have to take forward with you. We do partner with a company called Global Rescue that have the reach to operate in this area that's becoming increasingly less populated. But through that, there is a 24-hour reach back medical facility where you have doctors and paramedics in a room where they can help you talk through any injuries or issues you may have going forward and give you the best possible advice. That has been used once or twice and they've been fantastic. And then lastly, field rescue, should you require it. Field rescue will get you back to a hospital appropriate for the nature of your injuries, which I'll cover later, and nothing more, where your insurance will take over. GPS, I'll send out the preloaded airfields. It will have a load of airfields that you need to preload and be in your GPS for emergency. Within the rescue plan, which I'll talk about on the next slide, it will talk about how to get to them. And some of the airfields you'll notice are inland. This is maybe an exchange point and you just need to know where it is. So even the ones inland, please download. And they're really on you. War game, all outcomes. Don't just go off what I say. Plan and train in all your training for the worst outcome. What happens if, and how do you resolve it? How do you mitigate it? How do you overcome it? And what you're going to do if any of it happens. So the medical plan in general, and this is an overview of what you'll do. So you can build it into your planning and consider it throughout because this is what we'll use on the Yukon 1000 race. So there's two types of casualty. If we're looking at the left-hand side of the top layer and the bottom layer of boxes, firstly, you've got an immediate threat to life, and then you've got a non-life threatening casualty. So if we deal with the top left line and work across the top line, and then we'll go down the bottom one. But the immediate threat to life, that's something that's happened instantly. Obviously haven't planned for as such at that given time, but probably talked about in your training and maybe rehearsed as well. So you can assess the situation and remove yourself from the danger as a pair or individual. And then you're going to do your initial treatment of the casualty, whatever it is. Once you've done that, concurrently, you're going to hit both on your SOS trackers, both of them, you're going to hit the SOS button. This in turn then on the Zoleo network goes straight to Global Rescue Ops Room. They're going to see two trackers fire up, and then you're going to follow up with a phone call. They're obviously working out your location from both trackers, but then you're going to fire up the satellite phone and you're going to tell Global Rescue. You're going to tell them what's gone on, what you've done about it, and seek medical advice if it's obviously emergency. And you're going to leave, most importantly, your satellite phone on throughout because they will need to reach back to you. They're probably going to cut you off and say goodbye and leave you with some quick immediate advice while they then come up with a plan. Whether they get to you and can get to you there where you are, or you may need to move to a given airfield that you've got preloaded in your pack, in your GPSs, or to an open bit of space where they can extract you. And that will be the plan. And then there's obviously a time piece where you've then got to move to that location or wait for them to arrive for the evacuation. Now, really importantly, this is not in a city. And for those who are not used to this sort of space, this can be days. This will unlikely be anything less than 2 hours unless you're in trouble right outside Dawson City or in Whitehorse at the start. That will be the best casevac. Anything outside of that will be upwards from 6 to 24 hours. Again, weather dependent, no matter how much in peril the casualty is. So really consider this and build this into your training. Okay, non-life threatening. The bottom layer now, working from left to right. You're going to assess the situation, move from danger, and then you're going to do your initial treatment. You might then call for Global Rescue for support, and they will carry out, obviously, get their medics on the phone to you and their doctors, give you advice for further treatment, then do an estimate with you of, reassess, call us back in 12 hours or take this type of medication and carry on, and they'll evaluate it. Use the satellite phone to warn me off, and I can start planning ahead for you if we need to consider you getting out. Um, but this plays out every year. Normally somebody's a bit injured, smoke inhalation, problems with their body, a sort of day out or two from Dawson City, the halfway point, and they say, we're going to pull out there, we're done. And then I can start sorting you out a hotel room and work out a way to get you across to Alaska. If you don't do that, then I can't assist. And then we'll execute the plan, whatever that looks like. But you'll leave comms and satellite trackers on throughout, so I can still monitor you all the way to the end of the race. So that's an outline of the medical plan. Okay, insurance, again, this was covered in the race interview, but I'll just cover it again. Sort of our American and Canadian friends are very alive to this, and a lot of Europeans seem to not be over familiar with this, but please read the small print, throw it into ChatGPT, make sure that you've got kayaking, canoeing on it, make sure it covers you for the minutiae detail and doesn't rebuff you when you really need it. So your insurance will kick in once we get you to a hospital appropriate for the nature of your injuries. That'll be Global Rescue. They'll throw you out at a hospital that's, again, appropriate for the nature. If you've got an ember in the eye for some reason, you burnt a fire or something like that, they'll get you to an eye specialist clinic. You know, if it's a broken bone, they'll get you to the best broken bone place on either side of the border, Canada or the US. And then your insurance needs to be able to kick in and pay for the treatment there on after. And that's essentially what you need to have. We've got the 24-hour reach back via the satellite phone, but you need to have obviously extra insurance for repatriation and then both sides of the border. Make sure you've got that. Casualty evacuation, I'll just talk about that. If you pull the pin and decide to get pulled off the ground, what is not in the contract with Global Rescue, if they think that you're bluffing your ticket and just being a bit weak and have used the emergency services to get them out, they will come to you with a bill of the aviation fuel or the plane fuel, whatever it is, they will put that bill on you. So, because obviously they could be prioritising you over another casualty and there's nothing wrong with you. So you need insurance as well, possibly. I'll leave that with you if you think you need it, but you need to have a genuine injury if you're calling these guys out and not be bluffing your ticket. And I'll leave it there. So just covering off the race finish then, what does that look like for you? This gives you some rough parameters then to sort of plan off. But the cut-off as it stands is going to be that, as we've mentioned previously on the slide. What happens is we land, we do some final kit checks and phone checks and tech. We'll do a little ceremony, and then you're sort of zombified at this stage. But I'll get you up to the, in this picture, the sort of building behind. We get you a feeding you, a sort of burger, which is half a cow with a couple of mattresses, or vegetarian options, or whatever it is that you fancy. We get a feeding you, and then behind there is a little open space, and we put your tents up and we put you to sleep for a few hours or quite a few hours until this red bus completes a circuit and come back to you. And so there's sort of no messing around really. Once you're in and we can fill that bus, we'll get you out of there and we get you to Fairbanks. And it will take you to the Walmart in Fairbanks to a phone box, and we'll churn you out there because we haven't got enough time for that to go around the city, dropping everybody off at hotels and checking people in. It's just going to turn you out there. You jump in a taxi and get to the hotel that you're booked or will book on the way. It's pretty remote and it's a pretty austere road to get in and out of there, and we're just short the Arctic Circle. So it will turn around quickly, throw you out, and then leave you to your own devices. So just expect that at the end. We'll get you out there as quickly as we can. Now, now you're super tight as a community, and you will want to hang around to see other teams that you become friends with. But we just can't do that. We need to get you out there, and there isn't much going on at the end anyway, and they can't sustain too many people logistically at the hub where we finish the race as well. So we'll get you out there, and you'll want to taste the civilization again anyway, and a hot shower. So that's kind of what the end looks like. If you need to start planning, I guess really the key consideration for you is when you book your flights out of Fairbanks International Airport. All I would say to you is every year I have one team that ring me up the night before the cut-off, and it hasn't gone as well as they anticipated. They'd sort of give themselves 8 days, let's say, to finish it, or 7 days. They ring me up saying that they're just going to push on through, not stop, they're not a whole night because they've got a flight to catch. And I'm saying, that's fine, but you're disqualified, you're out the race. And I've had to exercise that once or twice. So just consider that. Don't be in that position where it will just all be wasted just because you overestimated your abilities to race. But hopefully, again, that doesn't happen. Some top tips, and it doesn't really change, sadly. It's the same recurring things I see every year. Do your research, really dig into that minutia, but go back to that, what I give you in the race interview, and go over those questions and say, have we done that? Do we know that inside out? Because often the minutia is really looked at, but not the obvious things. And there's assumption that one of the pair have got it within the team and you haven't got it. And so really do that research so that you turn up on the start line with no stone unturned and you are not worried about other teams, that you're absolutely backing yourself because you prepared fully and well across the 10 months prior to the race. Cross skill and train. So you're clearly going to divvy up the skills between the pair of you. But then again, there's no point if one of those people become a casualty and they know all the med stuff and you don't, then it is going to go well. Same as communications. So own that skill, master it, and then cross train as much as you can between you. And so that you've got some semblance of those skills to carry out treatment, triage, first aid, medical, evacuation, etc. Should the balloon go up and you have to exercise them. Correct equipment and food. If you've got rubbish equipment, then you're probably going to have a rubbish experience. You know, if you're using it for the first time on the race, then don't be surprised if it doesn't work. And that's really with the same food as food. Really think about it. You know, don't just draw back to your marathon disables you did, where without being derogatory about it, you know that the support at the beginning, the middle, and the end, somebody's setting up that tent and that camp for you. You're kind of on rails unless you're the first person at the front of it leading the way. You're just following the herd. This ain't that. So don't refer to that. You know, take some reference on what your body feels like, but this ain't that. So go back to that estimate and think about what you're doing before you come. Don't do the race before the race. Again, I say this and it comes out in the brief every year, but I'll see 2 or 3 teams absolutely exhausted on the start line. You know, they've trained hard. They've got the last flight there. They're probably starting with jet lag. Okay. If you're that team, then you're just going to be fighting to make the cut-offs. You're not going to be racing. Prepare your minds and your families. Bring your families along the journey with you. Let them know what you're doing so it isn't a shock and they Google it in the last few weeks before you come and they're horrified. And prepare your minds. You know, you're going to be disconnected from the world for a week, away from your loved ones, away from tech, away from your jobs, and you're going to have a lot of time in your own head in an unfamiliar environment for most people. So, you know, prepare yourselves for that and just give it the due diligence and respect it deserves. Bears. Again, sadly, in the race interview, probably most of you, even though you got selected, probably at least 80% of you said bears were a top of your sort of threats to life. You'll be frankly lucky if you see a bear, and if you're really unlucky, you want to come into camp, which I think's happened once or twice ever on this race. Be respectful, know they're there, but this comes down to you, your skills and drills, what you're doing with your food, etc., etc. It's all basic stuff. Do your research, and you'll be fine. Mentors. I've spoke about this in the interviews. There are some brilliant people in the community. In fact, they're all brilliant. They're super tight, and they will fall over themselves to help you and give you their experience and what they learn. But it's their experience, okay? And so speak to a different group of people. Don't speak to the people that win the race because unless you're in their league, you know, they're probably semi-professional in what they do and they'll probably got some different learning points than maybe what you want. But if you are in that league, clearly speak to them. But get a mixed broad of views. And as I say to most people, you know, I'd say the teams that come in the bottom third didn't plan to be there. And so they've probably got a whole host of learning points for you to move onwards. Your rights and our rights, as I said, it's your right to pull out at any point right up to the start line, but it's our right to obviously those mentors, Yukon race fleet. If you're popping up in my inbox and people saying these guys don't seem prepared or they're lunatics, then I won't hesitate to pull the plug on you. If you're not showing that seriousness to understanding the race, the risks that come with it, and doing your own work to prepare for it. Okay, then really don't underestimate this challenge. As I say on the race interviews, only about 20% of the teams actually are in this race that are racing, and that you can flower it in whatever excuse you want. It's just poor preparation. 80% of teams turn up, and by the end of the first night, regardless of what their plan was, they are just surviving to make the cutoffs by the end of that lake. Only 20% of the teams are actually in the race and racing and not even worried about the cutoffs or focused on the cutoffs. They're sticking to their plan. They've done their due diligence and research, and they are actually in a race, which is much more fun, I assure you, being at the front and being in that little race than it is plodding at the back of that 80% just trying to survive and trying to make the cutoffs, and a lot less uncertainty as well. So do not underestimate this challenge. And then finally, questions. If you're coming to me with questions that you can work out for yourself, then and as I said before, that is a red flag. Typical question. The last 2 years on the bounce I've had, we don't agree with tents on the packing list. We think a hammock is better. That's great, but when you get into the Arctic Circle, there's nothing to tie your hammock to. So that's just a red flag straight away to me. And so I really question what you're looking at and reading and who you're talking to. So any questions you've got, really try and work it out yourself or through your mentors, whoever you decide they are, find them yourself, and then work that out for yourself. The questions. If it's glaringly obvious, it's a safety issue or it's a boat or something like that, then please do come back to me. But if it's something you could have worked out yourself, I'm going to put a red flag against you. It's an expeditionary race, and I'll hone in on the importance of that. That I'm not going to be there on our chat group to pick up the phone when you have to make a timely decision on the ground on the race. You have to come up with and think around the problem yourself, and we start that from here on in, and it's the best mindset to work out all the way from here on in. Which also leads to the sort of final point in that is when you're getting training and speaking to people and building up for this race, my opinion is do not use people that haven't done this race. Get the best advice from people that have done this race. If they've not been in your shoes or been in those shoes that you're preparing for, then I would be really, really hesitant on getting advice from people that haven't done it. It always shocks me. In the feedback at the end of the race, people say that was the biggest mistake they made, that they got trained and spoke to somebody that had never done the race and didn't really understand it. So again, just consider that. I'm sure most of you have worked around that, but enjoy those top tips. So we'll come to the end of the brief now. What are the next steps? Next steps is really for you to prepare. Clearly do your estimate as a team, work out where your strengths lie, and then build your own training package, whatever that looks like going forward, and prepare wisely. Stay healthy, and so again, I see teams that are injured before they even start. Keep an eye on the travel, but and understand the rules. COVID happened, monkeypox was becoming a thing a year ago. Keep an eye on things and understand your travel routes and your visa issues, etc. Get into the race. Read the terms and conditions and make sure you know them. Most of you have signed them and getting them back to us now. Set up your trackers by May, and then by May we'll link you to the tracking company, but be familiar with it. Get it as soon as you can. Don't leave it as a last minute piece of equipment. It will be the most important bit of equipment when it goes wrong. Book your vessel immediate effect and get it locked in, because if you haven't got a vessel, you're not on the race, regardless of making the cut. And do that as soon as possible. Book your hotel at the sternwheeler, and so just reference the Yukon 1000. There is a discount there. Utilise that if you need to. There's other hotels, but we just use it as a central reference point if you want to use it. If not, doesn't really matter. read the details timing matrix that I'll put out in May next year, and that will give you the sort of exact moments where the final race briefings and interviews are, but the dates will not change. They will remain extant. And then lastly, you're probably going to listen to this about 10 times and make your own notes of where you need to prepare. You'll hate my voice, as I do, playing this back. But really, it's been really awesome to meet you on interviews. A lot of you done really cool stuff that I'd still like to do. You're fascinating people, and that's probably why you really gel as a tight community quite quickly. I'll see you on the river, and look forward to hearing your stories of how you prepared and trained, and our communication over the next 10 months. Best of luck.